Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today, I'm going to be discussing all things Carlton and how their end to 2024 may really harshly impact their future and where it has all gone wrong for them in the past 6 weeks, so about a month and a half, and why their drop off in form has been so significant. Before we get into the video, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video, really help push the video in the YouTube algorithm, as well as if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my channel, as I'd really appreciate it. But with that being said, let's get straight into the video.
It came up behind him like a librarian. Jesus!
So I'm recording this on the Tuesday night before I think I'm uploading this on the Wednesday. And obviously the team injury lists have been announced, and Carlton have got 6 injuries from their most recent game against Hawthorn. And to say that that could affect their season is probably an understatement, given the severity of who they are losing. So obviously we know the two big ones are Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow, their two key forwards, and now out for the game. And outside of that, they lost Fogarty, they lost Sard, they lost Jordan Boyd, who's 3 to 6 weeks with an adductor injury, which is really disappointing. And then they also lost Jack Martin with another hamstring. So his career is potentially on the ropes now because I believe he's a free agent as well. So if you look at their total list, it's almost 20 players on the injury list. You got 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. You got 17 players. That's almost half your list. And it builds up and it puts a lot of pressure on other players to perform. And to be honest, some of those players just haven't performed. And that's sort of what's gone wrong. Yes, they've had injuries, and yes, that has affected them, but it hasn't just been that. You look at the Hawthorn game, they weren't very good before all these injuries started to pile up. It just made it 10 times worse. If you look at some of their other games, they've had some players missing. Obviously, Tom de Koning, he really got into form and then unfortunately got injured. But they still have a good backup ruckman in Mark Pittonet. They just haven't been good enough outside of that. Their top end talent haven't performed. Cripps has been sensational this year. I've got no queries with him. But Sam Walsh, where's he at? Is he really going to be the number one overall pick? Is he that damaging player anymore? Because so far this year, he hasn't been. Adam Chera, we know his history with soft tissue injuries, and that's really started to build up. You've got George Hewitt, who has been played outside of his position this year. Matt Kennedy, who is a bit of a problem for one of their other issues, but he has found difficulty this year in getting even into the team, being played as a sub the fair few times. They just haven't had their top end performers playing well enough for the entirety of the year to potentially warrant a top 4 spot. And at the moment, being out of the 8 is really dangerous because their season is on the edge. So, as I mentioned, one of their biggest problems that comes along with Matt Kennedy is their ball use going inside 50. Whilst they've got some good ball users off of halfback, including Adam Sard, Jordan Boyd was one of the better kicks in terms of like percentage of hitting of accuracy. He was fantastic. You've got the likes of Sam Walsh, who in theory is a good ball user, but they rely too much on Curnow and Mackay in contested packs, either getting the ball to their small forwards or taking the mark themselves. Matt Kennedy, as I mentioned, is one of the worst kicks going inside 50 because he just bombs it long. He doesn't find a target. He doesn't go short. He doesn't try to hit up a Matt Owies or a Jesse Motlop. So that doesn't only affect him, that affects everyone else because it becomes a problem. Everyone else decides to go long. Cripps, he's never been known for his ball use, but that's sort of what you get. Adam Chera is a better ball user than a couple of their other midfielders, but still not fantastic. He's not hitting a 40-meter dart on every week. George Hewitt, also not a known ball user. They're really missing Sam Doherty in that area, but also they're not getting those high half forwards or their fullbacks into position to be able to kick inside 50. You look at players like Nick Dacos. Yeah, they played off of halfback at times, but they're going all the way up into the forward 50s sometimes. You see that a lot more often for other teams than what you do with Hawthorn. Look at Josh Weddle, who's a key defender. He's up at the 50 kicking goals. You don't see that with Carlton halfbacks anymore. And that's a big problem because their ball use just isn't very good. They need to become a little bit less key forward focused and see if they can harness their other players because Jack Martin, potentially moving Mitch McGovern forward now with the injuries. They need to find a medium forward who's a much better lead up target because at the moment they don't have one, and their ball use going inside 50 has been atrocious. As I mentioned, with the potentially moving Mitch McGovern up forward with the key forward injuries to Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow, another point that I have is that the tactical flexibility in this team just probably isn't there. They don't have enough players they can switch around. I don't think they try and do it, but I don't think it's enough in this list to where they can move some pieces and really get some impact from that change. I think they're going to have to do it this week, so moving Mitch McGovern forward, probably bringing in Lewis Young to play up forward. But outside of that, you look at their midfield, Cripps doesn't really play anywhere else. Walsh can potentially play on a wing, but his best is still inside. Chera, they've tried to play elsewhere, but it just hasn't worked. Hewitt's a big inside midfielder. Kennedy, they've tried as like a medium forward, and it just hasn't been fantastic. And outside of that, their wingers are pure wingers. Ollie Hollands, pure winger. Matt Cottrell played a bit of half forward, and he can definitely do a bit of a switch role at times. But outside of that, their halfbacks are pure halfbacks. They can't go into the midfield. They're key forwards. They don't want to move up the ground as much, although Kerno's still pretty good with his field kicking. They just don't have a lot of flexibility. Something along those lines of what they've done with Chincotta, where they can use him as a tagger, is nice, but they really tried to do it early, or sorry, more mid-season, and it worked for a couple of weeks. But then they tried to do it on the wrong players. They went to a Cornelio instead of a Whitfield. You need to, especially against the Giants, lock down their tsunami wave. If you can stop their ball movement and their handball game getting going, then you can stop them. Instead of going from the inside game, which the Giants aren't fantastic at this year, they decided to not go and force their outside game, which is their strength, to get going. And that's what got them overrun in the end. If you look at the Bulldogs game, I'm pretty sure they went with Tobontempelli, and Bailey Dale had a crazy good first half, switched it back, and they're able to stay in the game. So just some tactical flexibility would really help this list. Obviously, they're going to do it this week now with all the injuries, but it was a real problem that I found where teams like Collingwood, they can just put Jack Crisp in the middle of half back or half forward where he's shown he can move around. Nick Dacos is one of those. Isaac Quainer can put on a wing and potentially even play on a Jeremy Cameron at different times. There's a lot of movement that can go around. Sydney as well do it where they can play Heaney up forward. Look, if you look at the best teams, Chris Scott is known for this, where he just doesn't always have his mind set on certain things. Having tactical flexibility makes your team so much more unpredictable and more difficult to defend. And I don't think Carlton have that. And I think it's a big weakness in their list. Whilst it is amazing, there's so much top end talent, the rest around it isn't necessarily complementing their big pieces. And I think it's a bit of a problem that they will need to look at the end of the year. I like the Elijah Hollands pickup. I think he could really be a big piece in this for the potential where they can really use him as that medium forward, small forward, sorry, and have an impact in a final. But at the moment, it's probably just not fully 100% in his body. Something like there's stories, especially in the NBA, where you take years to get used to your body and how you can perform at your best. He's probably going to try and find that in the next couple off season because at the moment he's probably not running out games as well as he could. Now it becomes where to for Carlton for the end of the season. They're sitting ninth at the moment, only percentage outside of technically seventh, but there's a fair bit of a gap between them and the Bulldogs off of percentage. Obviously, Hawthorn overtaking them by like 2% or something in the end. But where to becomes a bit of a problem. They're going to have to get some players back if they really want to contend for finals, but they need to get there first. So they've got West Coast in WA this week, and with West Coast winning two in a row, technically one of the form teams in the competition, if you look at it simply based off of wins, then it becomes a bit more difficult than what some people might expect. Um, Jeremy McGovern's going to have a field day more than likely, unless they want to go defensive and put Lewis Young on him as a lockdown role, similar to Bailey Frampton versus Harris Andrews in the grand final. But it's going to be interesting to see how their forward line looks. Do they move a couple pieces around? As I mentioned, Mitch McGovern, he's the most likely to. They're going to have to bring in a Lewis Young. Do they give a debutant to someone like Ashton Moyer? Um, but it's a very difficult thing because they don't have Jack Silvani who they can play there. Obviously, De Koning's injured. They're just running really thin at the moment. But after that, if they do get the win, which I think they need to, and with a bit of percentage, they have St Kilda in the final round. And while St Kilda aren't a great team, especially right now, they can definitely have an impact on, especially in the next two games, given it's Geelong and Carlton, two final teams. They could very, very easily end Carlton's season because if they're not careful, they can get overrun. St Kilda have shown that they can play well, they can score now, potentially. And against the Carlton defense, that hasn't been anywhere near as good as it was in the back end of last year. They have shown vulnerabilities. Can St Kilda attack that? It's going to be a wait and see. But it's the Sunday 3:20 game, so it's one of the last games of the year, and everything will be riding on that game for Carlton, given that they win this week. I think that if their entire list gets fully healthy, players like De Koning, Kerno, obviously Mackay as well, Adam Chera probably won't be back for the rest of the year. I don't even think it's worth it risking. Lockie Fogarty's done for the year, which is very unfortunate. Potentially getting Fantasia back as a little bit of a spark. Obviously, going to need Adam Sardoff of halfback. If they can get enough players back, then if they do make finals, watch out because they're going to be dangerous. But it's going to be difficult to get there, and they're going to have to rely on other teams to move around and not on only their result. Because if they win both games, I think they technically can still miss out, and that's if that's the case, you're in a really bad position. And so for Carlton, you just got to win both games. You got to make finals this year because otherwise it's a huge disappointment and probably a really big failure for this year, given they were second only 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think it's going to be a tough couple of weeks for Carlton because there's just not a lot of hope. There's a lot of downness around the club at the moment, and there's not a lot of energy. If you look at Hawthorn, the vibe that they have going on at the club at the moment is very different to a Carlton. And it's honestly impacting the way they play. There's just not a lot of energy. They're not celebrating goals as they once were, and they're not able to carry momentum through games as well. And that's becoming a bit of a problem because momentum, honestly, right now is one of the key differences in how teams can win games. If you can capitalize on it, you're going to win. If you can't, because there's going to be swings in games, then more than likely you're not going to be at the end of the season playing in a potential prelim or grand final. And so for Carlton, there's going to need to be a fair bit of change if they do want to make finals. I think they will because I think potentially a Fremantle will drop out given the difficulty in draw compared to Carlton's, but it's not going to be an easy road to anything for Carlton at the end of the year. And it's going to be another potentially disappointing year as a lot of their fans have gotten used to. But that is going to be the end of this video. Really appreciate you guys sticking around. Leave your thoughts on the Carlton situation in the comments below. Please click the like button as well if you did like this video, pushes the video in the YouTube algorithm, as well as if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my channel if you do like this type of content. But as I said, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.